Do you want to know how you can double the value of a self-storage facility in 2.5 years? This is how we did it. So let me tell you about this first deal. We got this first deal through direct mail. So our first mail campaign, the seller reached out and he was a motivated seller. He wanted to sell his tree business. On this property, there was a commercial building that he was operating his tree business out of. They were selling the tree business, and the self-storage part of the facility, of the property, was extra income for them, but they weren't really treating it as a self-storage business. It was just there producing income, very easy to manage, very easy to maintain. The tree business was where they were really making their money. And so when they sold this property, because they wanted to sell the tree business, we were able to create a win-win. They had a certain price in mind that they wanted for the property, and it was actually like a 5 cap. A 5 cap means a capitalization rate. It means if we bought the property all cash, based on the income it's producing, we would get a 5% cash on cash return. And so for us, being new to self-storage and being new to the Sebring market, we reached out to a local broker in the area, asked him like, what would properties trade at in this market? And so he told us it was like a 7 cap market. So meaning that most people who would buy a property in this area will be looking for a 7% cash on cash return. But for us, we were willing to negotiate a 5 cap price, much higher price, 33% higher actually, because of 2 things. 1, there was immediate add value, and number 2, seller financing. So we were able to negotiate this deal, buying it at a 5 cap, $850,000, because we were able to structure seller financing with the seller, where we were able to only put down $150,000, and the seller financed us the other $700,000 at 3% interest only payments actually, for a 5-year term. So that allowed us to get into the deal with very little money and only need money in addition for our CapEx, our capital expenditures. That's like our add value to this deal. And so for on this deal, as you'll see in some of the photos we share, well, first they sold their tree business. So that commercial building, they vacated that unit. So it was a big commercial building. We had thoughts about breaking it up into like big RV rental spaces that were enclosed RV spaces. But actually we got somebody interested, an AC company, that was able to rent it out from us on a 3-year lease for $1,750 a month. So that was immediate extra income that the property wasn't seeing because they were utilizing that business. So as they moved out of that unit and we rented out to an AC company, that was an extra $1,750 each month to our bottom line, which we call our net operating income, essentially like our profit. The next add value for us was there was space to add buildings. So there was a large parking area. And so what we first did is added portables to the facility. So we added 12 Boxwell units. There were 8x20s. We added 12 additional 8x20 units that we could rent out. And along with that, we extended the parking lot. So the commercial side of the building and the property and the self-storage side of the property was split up by a fence line. So we moved the fence line back to increase the parking. We added some gravel to the property and allowed us to essentially almost double our parking. And then everything else for us was essentially just like curb appeal. When you drove by this property, it was off of a highway, but the doors were painted white. The buildings were white. So essentially, you drive by, you really wouldn't notice too much unless you really looked that there was a self-storage facility there. So what we did is painted all the doors Patriot red to really make them pop and stand out. We added billboard signage on the fence line to make sure that people drove by, they knew that there was a self-storage facility here. Some of the other things that we added to the property was a website with automation where someone can book online, they can essentially move in online, they never have to actually talk to somebody. And then we automated the gates and just kind of made everything a lot easier for the customer base to pay online and book more units. The other immediate add value for us was these rents. Like I said, they weren't treating the self-storage business like a business. They were running their tree business. So their rents were incredibly low compared to the market. So there's another facility pretty close to us, and essentially a 10x10 for them was like $90 and ours were like $45. It was literally half the price. So this was right in the middle of COVID. We purchased this property in June 2020. And so for us, it was hard. Well, we kind of fell away of like not increasing the rents right away. And so we did all the add value first, and then we raised the rents. So we were able to almost double the income that was producing because the rents were so much lower. And you would think perhaps that maybe a lot of people would move out, but that's not the case. I think one lady moved out who had 3 units. Everybody else stayed because even though that neighboring facility was $90 and we were $45, we essentially rose it to like $85. So we were a little bit less than the competition, and really nobody was going to move out because where else are they going to go? That one lady might have put her stuff in the garage, but that's about it. Everybody else stayed and everybody else paid. They were lucky to get a discount for so long being in those units. And so it was very, that's the one thing about this business, is a very sticky business. So when they see like, okay, it's $40 more. When I call around, they're all this $90, or higher than my unit already. So now I'm going to rent a U-Haul for $100, $150, spend the time and effort to empty my unit and then take it to another place that's the same price or more. So it's a very good business because of how sticky it is and how hard it is to, people want to keep their stuff and they don't want to have to spend the time and effort to move it. So I'm going to show you some breakdowns of the numbers and how what the increase of income was from takeover to right before we sold it, and some other numbers here. So let's get into that. So as you see here in this photo, this is what the property looked like originally when we bought the property. So as you see in this red marking here, this is where we decided that we can add some buildings, some portable buildings. And this was their commercial building at the bottom here with the tree farm. And so it was separated by a fence line right here. And that fence line is what separated the self-storage part to the commercial side. This is around the sales area. So that fence line was here before. We extended it back, increased the parking. This is the building after it was added. And essentially that increased our income tremendously. And then obviously this AC company renting out that unit was the other addition of our income increase. And so this property here, this is with the doors all painted nice and red. This is essentially the numbers when we bought it. So when we purchased it in June of 2020, the gross income on the property was $7,884. So $7,884 a month was the gross income. The economic occupancy was 61%. Economic occupancy means if, say, it was all 10 by 10s and they're all supposed to pay $100, that would mean that this property, they were all paying like $60. So that's how much less than the street rate, than the market rate they were paying. The physical occupancy is 94%. So it was pretty much all full, but they just weren't paying market prices. So that was our add value. So we purchased the property for $850,000. By the time we sold it, which was in February 28th, the gross income was $17,000. So we increased the income by $10,000 in less than 2.5 years. The economic occupancy was 88%, because constantly in this business, in self-storage, the rates are always constantly increasing. As you'll see, there's a lot of the big REITs, Public Storage, and some of these guys, CubeSmart, they raise their rates like every 3 months. We're not as aggressive on that. We're probably like every 6 months, but we definitely fluctuate our pricing based on supply and demand and what we have available of units compared to the marketplace. At sale, so we were under contract for $2,115,000, more than doubling the property value in less than 2.5 years. So this is the HUD statement here. You see we bought it for $850,000. The seller did a seller finance portion for $700,000, and we had to come out of pocket $138,000. So personally, for us, we didn't have $138,000 and we didn't have the money to do all the add value. So we actually raised private money on this deal. So we raised $300,000, paying 9% to a private lender in second position to lend us this funds. So we actually bought this property with none of our own capital, and we were able to, you'll see here soon, make a big chunk of change with none of our own money in 2.5 years. This is actually the breakdown of the sales price. So we bought this property again for $850,000. We sold it for $2,115,000 after closing costs of $26,000, tax prorations, rent prorations, the deposits that we were holding that we had to pass on to the new buyer, commission because we did list it with a broker, paying off the mortgage. It was a $700,000 payoff because it was all interest only loan. So we paid off the $700,000. The investor loan was also interest only, so that was $300,000. And so on this deal in 2.5 years, we made $1 million net, over $1 million net on this property in 2.5 years. That's incredible. This is not the only one we sold. We sold 3 properties in total at this sale. And so we're gonna go over those properties as well in a future videos. So make sure you subscribe and don't miss the other case studies we're doing on every single property, showing you how you can buy these types of properties, add value, and make $1 million paychecks.